Recording in progress.
Hello everybody and welcome to this webinar on training students to speak spontaneously, read aloud and transcribe. So the aims of this session are we're going to look at, first of all, teaching phonics effectively, then practicing applying phonic knowledge and receiving feedback, both immediate and by the teacher. Also, teaching students to speak spontaneously using group talk methodology. And then finally, how we can assess students' speaking skills really efficiently using the SanakoUK software. So first of all, to put this in the context of the English education system and our curriculum, let's have a look at how we should be teaching phonics effectively. Well, the Ofsted Research Review of June 2021 talked about 3 pillars of progression in the curriculum: phonics, vocabulary and grammar. Now, vocabulary and grammar are very well known to language teachers, but phonics was possibly something new. And it was defined as the system of the sounds of a language and how these are represented in written words. It talks about clear and reliable pronunciation and the links between sounds and spelling being integral parts of second language learning, and that a strong awareness of phonology is important. And the ability to decode words, that is, turn written words into sounds, also helps learners when reading texts, and it enhances autonomy and can improve vocab learning. So actually, phonics isn't just about speaking, it's about improving the skill of listening, but also here it talks about improving the skill of reading. And if you want to know more about that piece of research, that research review, there is a link to it from this PowerPoint, which will be sent out to all the people who have signed up for this webinar. So let's have a look in a little bit more detail about what the research review says. It talks about curriculum plans must show clear logic behind progression in phonics. Actually, I'm going to rephrase that word must. It says just above that in the title, high quality languages education may have the following features. However, we do know that this comes from Ofsted. We know it's based on the 2016 teaching review of MFL done by Ian Bokham, and it really is considered good practice, and the Ofsted training materials talk about it a lot. So there needs to be part of you've probably got progression in vocab, you've probably already got progression in grammar, but when I do have a look at what's on schools' websites in terms of their curriculum maps, and when I do work with schools and departments and look at their curriculum maps, the one that is often missing is the phonics one. And it's not just about when do we actually first of all teach phonics, it's also about planned practice and review, because as we know, students won't pick up phonemes straight away the first time, just like with anything. And when we teach them new grammar and new vocab, then we do need to review and go over that to make sure that it sticks. And then in January 2022, some new GCSE specifications were launched, and these are going to be examined, as we know, for the first time for Year 11 in 2026. And these talked for the first time about specifications should enable students to learn and apply the principles by which spelling represents sounds in standard or widely used forms of the language. And as a result of this, there are 2 new ways that students will be examined, and these have appeared in the draft specifications that were published by AQA, by Edexcel and by Educas. And the 2 new ways of being examined are dictation as part of the listening exam. So students will listen to a short spoken extract, not very long at all, and it needs to include at foundation level 2 words outside the vocab list and 3 words outside it at higher level. The idea being that students are going to then, to this new vocab, apply their knowledge of phonics, sound spelling correspondences, and then write what they think the word that they're hearing is. These aren't full dictations in the sense that students have to transcribe everything in the draft specs that we've seen so far. They are words that are gapped, so students will read some of the words there and then they'll have to fill in the gapped words. And the other part of the way that this is going to be tested is in the speaking exam, when students are going to read aloud a short text. 35 words long in foundation and 50 words long at higher. And they will be applying, again, their phonic knowledge to some new words as well that will be outside of the vocab list. And then following that, there will be some questions about what they've just read out. So we're going to move now just to thinking about phonics and making sure that everybody who's listening to this webinar is really clear about it. So I know that for those of you listening at home, you can pause this and have a think, but can you have a think about how would you define an actual phoneme? Could you give me an example of one in English, perhaps, and perhaps one in the languages that you teach, so French, Spanish, and or German? So we've got some examples here. So in English, I've got the sh. These are the graphemes. The phoneme is the smallest identifiable unit of sound. So it's just how it sounds. The grapheme is that written version of the phoneme. So I've got sh, s, o. And then I've got the OUGH letter string, which can actually be pronounced in English in 7 different ways, just to show you how confusing English is when compared to the other main languages that are taught in England, the French, Spanish, and German, which are usually quite follow quite strict rules of pronunciation. English, because it's had influences from French and from the Anglo-Saxons, from the Romans, we have got different ways of pronouncing letter strings. Often English is only 40% phonetic, for example. So OUGH could be pronounced ow, as in bough of a tree, O as in dough, that we roll some dough to make bread, or as in thought, oo as in through, uff as in tough. So those are just a few to start with, but I understand that there's 7 different ways to pronounce that. It's very different in French. In French, it's usually always the same way that you pronounce something. Sometimes you could have different phonemes that would be pronounced in the same way. So I've got an example here of O, which could be written EAU as in chateau, or AU as in jaune, and O as in octobre. And all of those will be pronounced O, but they're not pronounced in different ways like in English, which is what makes English so difficult and why there's so many dyslexic children actually in English. We've got a few here in Spanish, some of the more challenging ones, and as well in German as an example. So the next question, what does segment mean? And can we segment these words? So first of all, lapin in French. Well, segment means to split a word up into its constituent phonemes. So for example, to segment the word lapin, it will be l, a, un. So you need to not think about the letters and not think about syllables. It's a different thing that we're thinking about. Let's have a look at another one in Spanish, perro. Let's have a go at segmenting that. And vifiel in German. So how many phonemes would each of those two have? So I've told you about lapin, that's 4 different phonemes. L, a, p, un. Perro also has 4 because we've got a double R, which is 1 phoneme. And then vifiel has 5 phonemes. And that's how we can split that up, segment it up in German. And how many phonemes are there in French, Spanish, and German? There are 44 in the English language, and the number of phonemes often gives you a clue about the phonological depth of the language in terms of maybe how complicated it is. Spanish is much less phonologically deep. It's 99% phonetic, for example, as is Italian, so it's going to have less phonemes. French is a little bit in the middle, so French has 36, Spanish 25, and German actually has the same as us in English, although the German rules of pronunciation are much more strict. And again, once you've learnt how to pronounce IE, which is E, or EI, which is I, or W, which is V sound, then it's always the case. So it does make it more simple to learn. Now, we don't need to teach every single French, Spanish, or German phoneme because many of them are identical to English. So if I compare, for example, French and English, the M sound in mare is identical to the M sound in mum. The P sound in pear is identical to the P sound in police, for example. Often lots of the consonants are very similar, not all of them. So we just need to focus on the ones that are different because those are the ones that English learners are going to struggle with. They won't struggle with the ones that are identical because they will just assume that the pronunciation is the same. So which are the most difficult? I would suggest in the 3 languages that we mainly teach in England that these in French, and also the silent letter rule in French, as well as liaison, these in Spanish and these in German are some of the most difficult that we'd need to focus on. And when you're thinking about a plan of progression for phonics, you're probably going to start with the most high frequency and the ones where students make the most mistakes, especially at the beginning of learning a language. So you might want to focus in French on some of your silent letters quite early on so that students don't get into bad habits, for example. And a nice activity to do maybe with slightly older students who might not have had your phonics progression activities, but I would still recommend going back and doing those, even if it's fairly new to you. But you can do this sort of activity where you say the French and then the English pronunciation of some key cognates. And it's also a really good way of emphasizing the fact that cognates are, a little bell should ring, a warning bell should ring in someone's head that yes, you understand the word, so that the understanding's there. But in terms of pronunciation, it's probably almost always going to be pronounced differently. And so students should think about cognates in particular, because those are ones that are often mispronounced because they pronounce them using the English rules of pronunciation. So if I focus on some of these cognates and say the English, then the French, I'm getting students to tune their ears in and to start thinking about the differences in pronunciation between the 2 languages, but also maybe telling me some of the rules. What are the particularly different phonemes? So we'd say agent, agent, euro, euro, chocolate, chocolat, prince, prince, rugby, rugby, dragon, dragon. And what I could pull out there is that soft sound, the silent letters at the end of agent and chocolat, the EU sound, the R sound in euro and rugby, the IN nasal sound in prince, the nasal sound in dragon at the end en, the U sound in rugby, which is where you purse your lips, which is a sound we don't have in English. So those are a few. The same with Spanish, agent, agente, euro, euro, chocolate, chocolate, prince, príncipe, rugby, rugby, dragon, dragon. And what we've got here are things like sound in agente. We've got the fact that you pronounce every word, so euro, every letter rather, and chocolate, you haven't got these silent letters like the E at the end of chocolate. You've got your accents denoting the stress on that particular syllable, and so on. And again, the same with German, book, Buch, ice, ice cream, Haar, hair, fabulous, fabulous, euro, euro, and object. And handily, the new GCSE specs actually list the phonemes that we should be teaching. So we've got here, you can just go and have a look at the specifications on the link that's part of this, the PowerPoint from this webinar. Those are the French, and we can see here there's quite a long list of the silent letters with liaison, but really it's the same rule. We've got our list in German here, and then we've got our Spanish list. So none of them should be a surprise. They're not the full list of phonemes in that language. They are the key, most difficult phonemes that students are going to come across. And the Ofsted training materials, which were zooming around Twitter, they're not actually on an official Ofsted website for teachers to download, but they are accessible if you go on the web, on the internet, or have a look on Twitter. From those, what Ofsted says that it would see as a strength regarding phonics teaching is direct and systematic teaching of phonics, as evidence shows that it is the most reliable method for assuring that pupils achieve accurate pronunciation. And it needs to be obviously based on a clear understanding on the part of the teacher on what the phonics is and the effect that it has on the language. And what Ofsted obviously would see as a weakness would be that little thought is given to teaching phonological rules and pronunciation. And it gives some examples that year 8 or 9 students mispronounce the QU sound, which they often do. Obviously, they say qua instead of k, and maybe say et instead of knowing that the T at the end of ETA is silent. And what Ofsted inspectors might therefore judge is that no systematic approach has been taken. Now, we do obviously know that students forget things, and even if they are mispronouncing, if you can show to inspectors that you do have a systematic way of teaching phonics and it's just that these particular students have forgotten, then that should hopefully not be a problem. So good practice in terms of phonics methodology is to firstly review any previously taught phonemes, and that just makes sense, like we would review vocab or grammar. Ask students to identify any words they know with the focus phoneme in, and I would focus just on one phoneme for a particular lesson, otherwise there's cognitive overload. And we might therefore say, okay, the phoneme A, can you think of any words with the A sound in that we've learned? And remind students to think about maybe numbers, colours, maybe greetings, whatever it is that they've learnt in most recently or in the last few weeks. So they might say things like sank for IN, the number 5. They might say lapin if they've learnt animals and so on. And then we do ideally a micro listening activity where students would listen to individual words and say which have the focus phoneme in, or listen to a rhyme or song and do a tally of the number of phonemes. And they do find that quite hard at first, but from my experience, both of teaching the higher levels of primary children of age year 5 and 6, ages sort of 9, 10, 11, and then teaching year 7, is that they get better at this over time. So it is worth persevering. And then ideally they would do a speaking activity where they look at a rhyme or a tongue twister with lots of examples of the focus phoneme in and use the model to practice and improve their pronunciation. And then finally, they would speak or read aloud, just like in the what's eventually going to be in the GCSE exam, some unknown words or phrases. And just at the beginning of teaching this, I'd focus on individual words rather than phrases or sentences, which is what you can get to later on as you start to go towards GCSE. And then ideally, lots of guided and independent practice through games and tools which provide feedback on pronunciation. Here's an example in French of some sequencing and how obviously you'd build in some regular review activities. HT2 stands for half term. And ideally, students need to have some language to hook their learning to. So you shouldn't be starting in week 1 of learning a new language. They need to know some words before you can then start looking at the rules and applying them. That is just a suggestion from me, particularly focusing on the high frequency letters and ones where students often make mistakes as well. And those are at the beginning of the sequence. And then you think about assessing phonic knowledge. And this is an example where students could have a go at doing some listening, and rather than filling out a full word, they're just focusing on some focus phonemes and writing the grapheme of that. And it's fine for it to be words that they've not come across before, because we want them to have a go at applying their phonic knowledge and filling in those gaps. So that could be something that you could add to your listening assessments, perhaps at the end of year 7. And then over time, it can get more difficult where they have to write full words and then eventually fill in gaps in sentences and in texts. And then in the speaking exam, you could consider giving them, first of all, in year 7, just some individual words to say, perhaps some double word phrases like un animal, deux oies. So then they're going to be applying the rules of liaison as well. And asking them in particular, if you want to, you could highlight or underline some focus graphemes. I'm going to just show you for a couple of minutes some resources that I created a few years ago, actually, which are now used by many schools to teach phonics in a fun and motivating way. And it's where each phoneme, and it's just focusing on the most difficult phonemes, the ones in the GCSE specification list that students find more difficult in French, Spanish and German. And in this case, each phoneme is an imaginary planet. And so the French version is called Planète Phonique, Spanish is Planetas Fonéticos, and the German is Phonetic Planeten. And you can access these from my website, speakeasy.net. I'm just going to take you through really quickly what a little mini lesson looks like, which only lasts about 10 to 15 minutes. And I would suggest inserting these into your year 7 scheme of work and doing one a week, one phoneme a week. So first of all, we would review any previously taught phonemes. Just going to make sure that I'm sharing my sound and so on with you. And these will be from some particular words that students will have come across.
Can you think of any words with the wa sound in?
And in this way, students are thinking about things like numbers, colours, animals, maybe greetings.
La planète Wa.
And then we go and visit La Planète Wa, where there's only things with the wa sound in.
3. Croissant.
Noir,
Poisson. Oiseau.
And then we do our micro listening activity where students are listening to 2 phrases and only one of them has the wa, and they just have to say, and they can indicate that with fingers, whether it's the first or second.
La Côte d'Ivoire. Le Cameroun. La Côte d'Ivoire. Le Cameroun.
And then second time around, we actually see it. So they have to indicate that before they see it, obviously. And I've deliberately chosen words here that students won't have come across because I want them to think about the sound rather than the meaning at this stage.
Marie-France. François.
Marie-France, François. So hopefully you've worked out it was the second one. Now that would go on quite a few times. I've just shown you a couple here as an example.
Marie-France. François.
And then we'd give them a rhyme.
une oie, deux oies, trois oies, quatre oies, cinq oies, six oies, sept oies.
Or it could be
a
tongue twister, which I'm not going to play to you. You get the idea. And then we give them a series of new words, and some of them are going to have phonemes in that they've previously come across. So there's a little bit of revision here as well, and they have a go at pronouncing those in pairs for 10 seconds. And then we have a quick listen to see if we were correct.
Moi, toi, boisson, victoire, soir, joie.
So essentially there's in each of the French, Spanish and German versions, there is a planet which links with each of the key phonemes that students need to know. I would say in French, including the rule of silent letters, there's 22. In Spanish, there's 16. And in German, there's more, there's 30. And what you can also do, and I'm going to now show you this using the SanakoUK Connect software, is that you can also apply your phonic knowledge and practice it using this really fantastic software. So I'm going to now share my screen and go in as a student. Okay, and I'm going to go and actually show you the IN phoneme version of this. So we have some phonics activities in French, Spanish and German that I've written and we've built into SanakoUK Connect software. So if I go and start it now, show that I'm sharing with you the sound I am, which is great. I will first of all listen to a series of words with the phoneme in.
5. Lapin. Pain. Main. 15.
And I would now have a go at filling in gaps. So this is a gap fill activity. You can have full words if you want, but we've just done partial words here. We could have a go at tallying. So this time I'm going to count how many times I hear the sound.
Rondin picota, la Marie a fait son pas, pas plus haut que son levain était moisi, son pas n'a pas réussi, tant pis.
I think that was 6 times. And then I'm going to listen and read the tongue twister.
Vers plein, je te bois. Vers vide, je te plains.
And then I can also listen to an example of this tongue twister using the pronounce feature of Connect. I can also slow it down and I choose male or female voice.
Vers plein, je te bois. Vers vide, je te plains.
And I can have a go now at pronouncing that as well. I'm not going to do that because my microphone is going to pick up both me trying to pronounce and also speaking to you on this webinar, but it would then give me some feedback. And I'll show you a little video clip of what that looks like. And I would get from 0 to 5 stars and get some feedback and underline where I had mispronounced. And I would then listen to some new words with the phoneme in and have a go at transcribing them.
Sapin, vin, prince, train, impossible.
Okay, and then when I've completed all those activities, I can go to the top and submit them. And then my teacher will see, I've entered this with as a named person, as a student, and so I'm going to submit my work like this. So I'm going to come out of sharing that with you. And go back into sharing our PowerPoint now. And I will, next time I go back into the software, show you also some new French, Spanish and German photo card and role play resources that I've created, about 8 for each higher and foundation level, 8 each of photo cards and role plays in French and Spanish, and about 4 in German. And these have also got the pronounce feature built in, so students can practice saying particular utterances before they eventually record themselves, so they get some feedback and hopefully improve first. So in summary, it's important to choose which phonemes and pronunciation rules you're going to teach and in which order. Choose some resources for practicing and teaching them. And then obviously apply a systematic practice and review schedule using guided and independent practice. And obviously the SanakoUK Connect here can both assess students' speaking pronunciation, but also provide some of this guided and independent practice. I'm going to move on now to looking at how we can teach students to speak spontaneously using group talk methodology. And it's really interesting that, and this is a tweet from Vincent Everett recently, where he says time and time again in their feedback, pupils understand they are learning to develop how they can speak and write, learn the grammar and the vocab. But what they really want is to learn to introduce themselves and have a conversation in the foreign language. And I think it's so true. And I think students often link their efficacy in a language with how well they can say it, use it, speak it, basically. And so that is probably one of the most important skills and one of the harder skills, I would say, to teach well and to practice, make sure that students are practicing it well, because obviously we can set them off doing pair and group work, but quite a lot of the time we can't be at every single group, obviously. And so we don't always know what they're actually talking about, and are they actually speaking in the foreign language. So the new MFL GCSE, most of the new speaking exam will be unprepared interaction. So it's not like students can prepare a whole list of speaking exam questions that might come up. And so this sort of skill of becoming more spontaneous in speaking needs to be practiced and developed over time, starting in Year 7. And it should be systematically developed, and the most frequent language should be revisited and then bit by bit made more complex over time. And I think it's a good idea to think about what sort of things are our pupils talking about themselves, not in a foreign language, but when they're just chatting at break and at lunchtime. What sort of things are they chatting about? And can we then encourage them to be talking about this in the foreign language that they're learning? And group talk aims to try and mirror this normal pupil talk more realistically. Obviously, it's not going to be perfect, and give students the ability to use the language of conjecture. So they're going to think, suppose, perhaps guess. And it was something that was pioneered by Greg Horton, and he won a European Award for Languages in 2008. So it's quite a long time ago, but whenever I've chatted to people who used to use it, we've all agreed, oh, that is going to be something that will be really beneficial for preparing students for this new GCSE. But also all of us, and I've certainly used it a lot, said how beneficial it was, how much students enjoyed it, how well it developed their skill of speaking. And the judges actually said that they thought they were hallucinating when they witnessed groups of teenage boys talking animatedly in French about sport, cars, school uniform, and the fact that the conversations were organic and they weren't speaking from a script. And that feels a little bit like the holy grail that every MFL teacher wants to try and get to. And I certainly use the group talk methodology. I had two classes actually that I took from year 7 all the way up to year 11, from 2011 to 2016. And one was a sort of higher performing group and one was a sort of mid to lower performing group. But both groups really successfully, we used the group talk methodology, which I'm going to go into more detail about. I did it about once every 2 weeks, and so it became very much part of their routine. It was part of our MFL department plan, what we did. And I probably got the best results that I've ever had at speaking at GCSE with these two groups. And I would put a lot of this down to the group talk methodology. So what's so different about it? So only the target language is spoken by groups. Interaction is between small groups, I would say 3 to 4 pupils. The tasks demand opinion, conjecture, debate. The language can be colloquial. The responses are aimed at being spontaneous, but they're not always immediate, because real spontaneity might mean that the students need to ever think for a few seconds. Now, in the original way of doing this, there was no set finishing time, although when I was training my groups to do it, I would put a timer on the board as a challenge and say, right, we're all going to talk to begin with in year 7 for 1 minute and then 2 minutes. And then very quickly, even by the end of year 7, we'd got to 5 minutes and even longer with the more able students. So you can have a set finishing time in the sense that you can have that level of challenge. There are 4 stages or levels of group talk, as we can see here. I'm not going to read it out to you, but I'm going to show you what that looks like in practice. So we've got the stage on the left-hand side here, and then we've got what the learning outcomes are in bullet point form here, and then some examples of the key structures and vocabs that you would teach for the French, Spanish and German. And as you can see here, although sometimes we've got examples like La Musique and Ir al Cine and Das Kino, that you can actually use these structures talking about any particular topic. We've got our stage 3 and then our stage 4. And stage 1 usually links well with year 7, stage 2 normally with year 8, stage 3, year 9, possibly into year 10, and stage 4 at key stage 4. And I thought the best thing would be for you to see an example of this in action, because that is the best way of sort of showing you what it's all about. So we've got a group of year 8 boys who are studying German talking about school here, first of all.
Ich denke, Schule ist okay.
Ja.
Ja, zustimmt.
Nein, Schule ist scheiße.
Du spinnst!
Nein.
Ich denke, Sport ist toll, ja.
Ja. Nein, Sport ist scheiße.
Was? Denkt Sport ist scheiße?
Ja.
Nein.
Nein, du spinnst.
Ja.
Nein, du spinnst.
And then here we've got some year 11 students using some of the stage 4 group talk phrases, talking about healthy lifestyles in Spanish.
Go.
No.
¿Qué haces para mantenerte en forma? Pues yo hago mucho deporte. Juego al baloncesto todos los días, señor.
Has dicho que los deportes son importantes, pero yo creo que una vez la semana es mejor.
Yo estoy de acuerdo cuando dices que el deporte es importante, pero pienso que es más importante relajarse.
Ni hablar. Hacer deporte es muy relajante. Y, aunque has dicho que el ejercicio es importante, también se debe comer bien.
Sí, es verdad. Entonces, tienes que comer verduras y frutas para mantener la buena salud.
Pues mi madre dice que se puede comer chocolate,
tu madre.
¿sí? Todos los días y no es un problema. No es un problema.
Sí, estoy de acuerdo. Yo tomo las patatas todos los días y no estoy gordo. Que no. ¿Sí o no?
Espera un momento.
And I think what comes across really powerfully here is the fact that the students are putting some actions into it. They really sound like they know what they're talking about. There's some fun in there, a bit of a laughter, and it's real language being used in real situations. And they're not coming across with everything straight away. I think they've got the group talk phrases in front of them, but it's not scripted. So they've got some sentence starters to help them, remind them about some things that they should include. But we have that sort of level of interaction, which I think is brilliant. And I actually showed that video clip to, I think they were at the beginning of year 10, my Spanish class. And I said, this is where you're going to be able to get to by the end of year 11. And they didn't quite believe me, actually. But lo and behold, they were able to get there, and they did brilliantly, and were able to have those sort of spontaneous conversations.
Go.
So how would we introduce group talk? Ideally, you'd agree on it as a departmental focus. You'd build some objectives and opportunities into your existing schemes of work. I think it's really important to start it in year 7 and get students into the routine of it, but you could equally start it with a current year 8 or year 9 class now, so there's no reason why you can't. You make it an integral part of your planning. And group talk scenarios, it's up to you what you use as a stimulus, but what I found successful was having a series of pictures face down in the middle of the table, and a student would pick up a picture and it would be on whatever topic. So it could be on sports or hobbies, it could be on TV programs, and I'd have something that's current and up to date that they want to talk about. It could be on celebrities, which I know is one of the topic areas of the new GCSEs from both the main exam boards, AQA and Edexcel. That's something students like talking about. It could be the names of teachers. They've always got strong opinions about teachers. It could be food, anything that students have got strong opinions about, both negative and positive. So you'd want to have pictures that are going to elicit both positive and negative opinions, and you can build up and keep these resources centrally. And it's a good idea to display some as well in the classroom as a reminder, the main phrases of the particular stages that you're teaching. Ideally, it would take place, I would say, no longer than every 2 weeks, around 10 minutes, but obviously going to build that up over time. You're going to have to spend some time introducing these sentence stems carefully and practicing them. Students aren't going to get them straight away. And I'm going to show you examples here now of how you can use Sanako Connect, both as an oral speaking mat to develop people's ability to talk independently, but also how you can then set them off to have group conversations and also record those if you wish. I'm just going to quickly, before I do that, show you a sort of example of a launch lesson. So we're going to go through some of the vocab, which you can see links really well with opinions. We're looking here at silent letters and doing a bit of work asking students to tell me from what they've heard, which are the silent letters at the ends of words. And then we've got some key phrases here. C'est, je trouve que c'est, je pense que c'est, which I'm going to be repeating and practicing. Got some qualifiers here. You might not want to teach all of those in year 7. In fact, that's probably too many. You're probably going to teach a couple in year 7 and build them up bit by bit over time. And then we've also can now take these into, make them into full phrases. So, je pense que c'est totalement génial. For example, we've got our positives and our negatives and our qualifiers on the first column. And then it's a nice idea. I would probably say to do oral translations rather than mini whiteboard, but then so you then ask the students to either write or say the French for some set phrases that are including the verb, the opinion bit, je pense que, the qualifiers, we've got totally here, and then we've got our adjective, stupid. You can go through a few of these just to practice. And then it's time for them to talk. And you could put on the screen yourself rather than giving them out these pictures if you want to sort of control it a bit more. And we've got the topic of food here. And we've hopefully got some things that are going to have a negative opinion about. So that's been deliberately chosen. So I'm going to show you an example now of one of Sanako's oral group talk support mats. We're going to go back into being a student in my Sanako lesson, and I can put a picture up into Sanako Connect. So I've created some ready-made group talk support mats which have got sentence stems in, and students can listen to those sentence stems. But I've also got a selection of pictures which can be discussed. And this one actually came from an American website, which is all about where students take photos of disgusting school dinners and then upload them onto the website. We've got the level 2 group talk phrases here, which you'll probably recognize from what I've just shown you. I've put them into the context of food here. And then we can also listen how to pronounce them.
J'aime. J'aime jouer au tennis. Je n'aime pas. Je n'aime pas écouter la musique.
And so on. And then we can have a go at listening to examples and have a go at recording and getting some feedback on our voices. And we can see here there's a series of different ones. Je n'aime pas manger dans la cantine, c'est très dégueulasse. Tu veux manger de la salade, and so on. Students could then have a go at recording themselves, saying these conversational phrases, so they can use the record button here and record into the microphone. And then the teacher can also set them up. Once they've done some independent practice, the teacher can set them up. And I'm going to show you how to do this by going into the teacher version now of, where are we, of Connect. I'm just going to zip along to this Sanako Connect here. I'm going to join my session and I'm going to go to my class. Now, when I recorded this webinar previously, we had a number of people who joined the webinar, but they're obviously offline now because they've gone off and done different things. But I can launch an exercise. And if you were doing this with your class, you'd have all your names of your students in front of you. I would launch it as a pair or group discussion. I could choose the group size, so I could choose maybe 3 or 4 per group. I can then shuffle the students around, so the computer will automatically put them into groups of 3. I can move those names around because I know the students better and who might work best together or not together, more importantly. Go to next, and then I can launch an activity. And that means that those students are now working in groups together. They've been assigned those particular groups. It's taking a little bit of time to think about this, I think, because I've got lots of offline students. And then those students are going to have that picture launched. Anytime I can click on the button at the top and speak to the whole class, so my voice would override everything. So I can say, you know, vous avez 2 minutes, il reste, you've got 2 minutes left. I can at any time click on a group, so I can go into group A and I can speak just directly to that group. And actually, if I've got the camera working on my laptop or my own computer, my face could appear on theirs if I want, and I could give them some feedback directly to talk, you know, to give them or some help. And then whenever I choose to end that exercise, if I tick collect all student submissions and then end it, everything that they have spoken about in their group will be recorded, and I can then listen to that later and provide some feedback if I wish. But I think actually most importantly, the fact that I can listen to what they've recorded, they know that Big Brother's watching them, as it were. They know that I'm going to listen. I think it helps them to be a lot more on task and to really focus on the activity. Whereas if I was in a normal classroom situation, that would be a lot harder. And I wouldn't be able to get around them all and listen all at the same time. So I know that I'm going to hear later on everything that they've spoken about, and it will give me some really important formative assessment information as to maybe which students are doing well, which have got it in terms of pronunciation, in terms of ability to use the vocabulary and the sentence stems, and maybe which students need some more support from me. And you can, of course, then extend the group talk to incorporate more advanced language and structures and use increasingly complex scenarios and different stimuli, including text, and perhaps allow preparation for task and note-taking. And I think also it's good for students to hear or to see what a good one looks like. So to include some model dialogues and podcasts will be a great idea. And as I mentioned before, the impact is very strong, particularly for boys. Students are motivated to speak, they speak more confidently, their oracy skills improve, questioning skills improve, and then just naturally, we're not doing it for the exam, but naturally their speaking results do improve in this way. And I've just shown you how to use the group talk methodology to support the SanakoUK to support that methodology. And then this will all help when it comes to the read aloud activities. So that's an example from the draft specification of a higher tier read aloud activity. And then the dictation one. And we can also assess students more efficiently. So I'm just, before I do that, I'm going to show you, I'm going to go back into the SanakoUK software now. We're going to go back here. Apologies for switching around screens. And show you really a huge variety of different kinds of things you can do. So you can include a video clip. This is a really nice video clip, and students can use it as a listening activity. So they can listen to this Amazon French Christmas little clip. We can read a text about it, and then they can answer some questions. They can find the French for, they can answer some questions in English. And then when they've finished, they can submit their work and the teacher can mark it. So it's great for setting homework as well as for doing things in class. We've got a Déjeuner du matin, the famous poem by Prévert, and we've got some activities, and students are going to have a go at translating some of these key phrases from the poem. We've got a huge selection of role plays and photo card activities, which are both in higher and foundation. So students can, first of all, read the role play instructions, listen to a good example of the role play. I'll just play a little bit of this for you.
Vous parlez avec une employée dans un office de tourisme en France. Moi, je suis l'employé. Bonjour monsieur, je peux vous aider?
Oui, je suis à Caen en ce moment.
Ah bon?
Vous pouvez me donner des renseignements sur la région, s'il vous plaît?
Okay, and so what I've done with that, as well as them listening to a good example, and they can perhaps listen first, they can do a multiple choice activity about that. And obviously I've only just listened to the first one, but this is self-marked. So once it gets submitted, you as the teacher don't need to mark it. You'll see how many answers were correct. And I think that is a renseignement. So we've also got a gap filling activity here. So students would listen again and have a go at filling in gaps. And I can't remember what these were. I'm just doing this from memory. And so on. And then students can practice recording their voice and getting some feedback using the pronounce tool. So they could listen to an example here.
Oui, je suis à Caen en ce moment.
They can have a go at pronouncing it. I might just give this one a go. Oui, je suis à Caen en ce moment. I liked my pronunciation. Thank you, computer. And if I hadn't pronounced any of it correctly, it would have underlined that. And then as long as the student remembers to tick the voice insert, he or she can take part in this role play. So I'm going to press play. And whenever I pause it, I can be the student version of this. I'm going to listen to the teacher's utterance and then I'm going to give it a go.
Bonjour monsieur, je peux vous aider?
Oui, je voudrais savoir qu'est-ce qu'il y a à faire dans la région.
Ah bon? Alors, il y a un marché en ville tous les mardis. Et aussi, on peut aller à Bayeux pour voir la célèbre tapisserie.
No, I just can't remember what I'm supposed to say next. I'm going to ask for information about the region. I'm going to give, okay. I'm going to give 2 details of what I've done yesterday. Hier, je suis allée à la plage et aussi j'ai fait des magasins. So you can see there in red are my utterances, and I can continue with the rest of the role play, recording my utterances. And then when I'm ready, I will press submit, and then the teacher will see what I've done, which we'll have a look at in a minute. So as I said, we've got 8 higher French role plays, 8 Spanish higher role plays, 8 foundation French role plays, 8 Spanish foundation role plays, and so on. The same with the photo cards as an example here of a Spanish technology photo card foundation. So we've got our photo, we've got our questions, we can listen to a conversation about the photo and do a gap fill activity with it. We can practice recording ourselves again and also do the voice insert. Just while I'm on this, we've got some examples of, for example, a phonics-based speaking assessment where students would listen to a series of words and have a go at filling in those gaps. A bit similar to what I showed you on the PowerPoint screen, but this is now set up as a ready-made listening assessment. You can set how many times the students are allowed to listen to particular sound files, so that would be appropriate in a listening assessment situation. You might want to suggest 2 or 3 times.
Year 8, Term 2 French, Achievement Test. Section A, Listening. Sounds of the language. This part of the test will take around 8 minutes. Part A, Phonics. You will hear the 15 French words listed below. Complete the spelling of each word by filling in the missing letters. Each dash represents one missing letter. For some of the words you hear, there may be more than one way of spelling them. Just write any one possible spelling for each word. The aim is to see how you write the sounds that you hear. You won't know these words because they're very rare. Don't worry, just do your best. You will hear each word twice. 1.
Rogne.
And so on. So I could now have a go at
Rogne.
inserting my answer.
2.
That took me longer than I thought. We've also can use the dictation. So I've got an example here from the GCSE Foundation French. This was from one of the exam boards. I think it was AQA, draft specification materials.
Foundation dictation. Le soir, il mange des frites.
So again here, following very much the way it's going to be actually examined.
Avec son ami suisse.
And so on. And again, that all gets to be marked when you submit it. It's ready marked, so it saves lots of time. You can also input GCSE exam listening assessments and get those ready marked as well. Obviously, it does take some time to input them, but we've had permission just recently from the WJEC exam board, which is very similar to what Educast do. And we're going to be creating some ready-made listening exams from the last few years in French, Spanish and German. And again, those will be all in there for free for people who use the Connect software. So just coming out of this and back into my PowerPoint, thinking about assessing students' speaking skills. And something that I don't know if many of you've thought about, and you probably would feel that certainly I felt like that when I was teaching full-time, is that I didn't assess students' speaking skills enough, because it was so hard to do that in a normal classroom situation. It would take so much time, either me going around and listening to every pair, doing a proper role play or photo card activity or general conversation, or the students coming up to me and me saying the same things over and over again and then giving me their answers. It's very time consuming. And so it's hard for me both formatively to get that assessment information and to know how I can support them, but also hard for them to have that level of practice, which is also important to develop confidence when they come to do the exams. And so this is with my head teacher hat on. I've been a head teacher for the last 6 years of two secondary schools. For every year group, it roughly costs around just over £1,000 of teacher time just to do one assessment of 5 minutes a year. Obviously, the more assessments you want to do, you can work the maths out. With Sanako Connect, you can deliver assessments simultaneously at a fraction of this price. So you could save over £4,000 of teacher time, and obviously time is money. We don't even have enough curriculum time at the moment to, I think, to teach languages well enough to get students to the level that they need. So if you can use something like the SanakoUK software and give students simultaneous speaking assessment, it's going to save you a lot of time and have more time to teach them. And it might be a good way to try and argue with your senior leaders who are deciding on your budget why paying for and buying SanakoConnect could be a really good investment for your school. So just to finish that off, I'm going to finally share with you. I'm going to go back and be a teacher now. I'm going to go back to the submissions actually, because I want to show you a couple of examples. Where have I got a submission? Of what it looks like. So here, this was when I did the webinar last week. I could have a listen to students. I could click on the feedback bar and I could either type some feedback to a student or I could record something so that next time they go in, they can either listen to my verbal feedback, especially useful if it's something that they've maybe mispronounced. I can model correct pronunciation. And I can also, let me just go back into here and I think I'm just now joining the session that I've modeled to you. Go back to my submissions and see what I've just submitted. So this was me, I was going in as Lucy, and you can see this has been self-marked and the correct answers are included there. And I'm hoping that my role play, Lucy's role play, in fact, has been collected. And I can go and listen to, this was me, my recording in this role play. Je voudrais savoir qu'est-ce qu'il y a à faire dans la région. And then I could right click on each of the utterances and either write or record a comment if I wish, and then send it back to the student. So in this way, the student's getting some very precise, bespoke feedback. And as we all know, feedback is a fantastic gift. And then finally, just to show you what you could do if we get back in the class situation, I've only got Lucy, which was me, who joined this particular exercise. But if I want to launch what you could call speaking practice, the teacher could be the audio source, or you could have pre-recorded a file, but it's much quicker for the teacher to be the source. You can launch this, and what you can do is ask the question or be in a role play. So you could say the role play utterance of the teacher, or the photo card utterance, or the general conversation question, or whatever it is you want to assess at Key Stage 3 as well. The students are all sitting there with their headsets and microphones ready. You say the question, qu'est-ce que tu as fait le week-end dernier? And they all record into it. Again, you can see me. I'll just close that down because it's sort of picking up the fact that I'm on Zoom as well. But I could then be recording. I could wait 10, 20, 30 seconds, however long it's going to take all the students to have finished answering that question. Then I ask the next question. And then when I'm ready to end that exercise, I just tick collect all student submissions. And that means that every single separate student's exercise, verbal submission gets pulled in, and I get to collect it. They don't say anything, so they can't stop me from collecting that. And then I get to mark it and again give them some bespoke feedback. So it's a really effective and efficient way, as we can see, of giving students some bespoke feedback. So I'm just coming to the end of this webinar now. It's been almost exactly an hour long. I'm just going to put up finally a reminder of my contact details. So this is my email address. If anyone's got any further questions, or if you want me to perhaps do a demo to your department of what SanakoConnect software can offer. If you want any further information about the phonics or group talk ideas in here as well. And thank you very much for listening to this webinar today.